During their marriage, ITV weather presenter Ruth Dodsworth was subjected to years of harassment at the hands of her ex-husband, Jonathan Wignall.
Yes, last week he was sentenced to 3 years in jail for coercive and controlling behaviour, which included placing a tracker on her car and opening her mail and following her to work.
Well, in the hope of helping others, Ruth's joining us today to share her story. This is, I mean, you're used to being on the telly, very used to being on the telly. This is a tricky one.
This, I would say, is possibly the hardest thing I've ever done. I've been with ITV for 25 years now, and it's lovely to be here and obviously to talk to you guys, but it's something I never saw coming. No. The details of my case were never meant to be public for one reason or another. They were suddenly out there this time last week when Jonathan was sentenced, and within an hour, every last detail of my victim impact statement that I'd read to the court was suddenly everywhere. And in a sense, it has been the hardest time, but because that decision to go public was almost taken away from me, it's been the best thing in hindsight that's ever happened.
Well, certainly your aim now and your aim today is to say directly to anyone watching, you have to see if you can spot the signs, which are not easy, and they're subtle and they're insidious. But when you do spot them, seek help, because people say to you, why didn't you get out? Well, it's not that easy.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I was married to this man for 18 years. And I think sometimes within a marriage itself, you know, at first you try to make it work. You think, well, OK, that's happened, let's move on. And you make excuses, you try to reason, you try to justify, you put on this, you plaster your smile on your face. And, you know, as you and I know, life isn't always as it seems, and especially in a job like ours where there's an expectation that, you know, you smile and you're happy, and sometimes, as I've said, that couldn't have been further from the truth. And that, in a sense, made it that much harder, but it also made me more determined to try and make it work. And it just didn't. It just didn't in the end.
So, you know, as I can only imagine, these sorts of things sort of progress over time. So, if you don't mind, can we go back to the start? So, when you first met Jonathan, was there instant triggers that you noticed, or was it not that way at all?
No, looking back, and hindsight is an amazing thing, isn't it? Looking back on it now, I can see that the signs were there. We were happy, but there were moments where his temper became obvious. And at first it wasn't...
Not towards you, it was towards other people.
At first, towards other people. But I think when you're with someone that you love, you take things out on the nearest and dearest, don't you? And so as that person closest to him, as things started to fall down elsewhere, business went through, you know, financial difficulties, I very much became the focus of his temper, his anger. I was the one person that he could direct it at. And, you know, looking back, as I said, with utter horror now, that I could see the signs, but you almost don't want to admit it to yourself. And I think that, in a sense, it has been quite a difficult thing, even for me to do now.
Yeah, of course.
The very phrase domestic abuse, coercive control, I find quite difficult to say, because for a long, long time I didn't recognise or put myself in that category.
And so it did progress.
Yes.
It did get considerably worse. At its worst, what was it like?
At his worst, and at its worst, just under 2 years ago, when really things escalated. I'd been in work. I worked for ITV in Wales as a weather presenter. I'd been in. During that week, he'd been phoning me hundreds and hundreds of times a day, turning up at the office, text messages, where are you, who you were with, who was I with. That particular day, he started drinking early in the day. By the time my children got home from school, they were phoning me saying, Mum, don't come home, don't come home. He's going to kill you. And I think, for me, that was a turning point. I didn't go home that night because I think if I had, I wouldn't be here now in any way, shape or form. And, you know, it took confiding to someone else for them to say, Ruth, if you don't ring the police, I will.
Yes.
And that really changed everything.
Well, this is a man who, whilst you were sleeping, held your thumb on your phone so he could open it whilst you were asleep. He was standing outside the bathroom door when you were in there. You were not allowed to see anyone. He completely isolated you from friends and family. People were frightened of him and didn't come round to see you.
Yeah, and you don't realise that isolation until, again, you look back on it.
Yeah.
His paranoia, his jealousy. I work in a very public job. I meet a lot of people, and you know, to him, he couldn't handle that, and therefore every male I met was a potential affair, and you know, that jealousy escalated to the point where, as I said, you know, he offered to pay my children money to go into my phone.
Oh my goodness.
You know, I have my phone is an ITV phone. Yours is probably the same. You have a PIN number. I mean, you know, you need a PIN number to get into it, you know, to get a drink of water these days. So there was nothing unusual in that. But I hadn't realised hundreds and hundreds of photographs of me. Some I was aware of, an awful lot I wasn't aware of.
Tracker on your car?
Tracker on my car after he was first arrested, which we only noticed because, you know, he would start to turn up in places where he had no reason to be.
Right.
And that I got suspicious at that point. And in fact, someone else said, I think there's something on your car. And there it was. So the coercive control then led to the stalking conviction. And it's been really, really tough.
Yeah.
It's been really tough.
I mean, I was reading your brief this morning, and one thing that really stood out to me and really upset me was when you said that I would sometimes wait for him to go to sleep because I thought it'll be all right in a minute because he'll be asleep.
Yeah.
And I suppose it's those little things that have been building up over time, and then you get to that point where your brain sort of goes, OK, I can't do this anymore.
If I could lie there and wait for him to go to sleep first, then I knew I'd be OK. If I went to sleep first, it wasn't on his terms, and you know, he would slap me across the face to wake me up. And, you know, this is a man that I loved and was father to my children. And, you know, I think as that behaviour escalated, I realised that it wasn't right. But when you're in that situation and you're isolated from your family, your friends, it's degrading, it's dehumanising, it's so very difficult to ask for help. And, you know, so many people have said, why didn't you speak to us? Even my own family are struggling to sort of understand why I didn't ask them, talk to them. And I'm lucky in that I've got all that support, but I couldn't. And it's so easy to say...
And I understand that.
It's so easy to say, get out, ask for help. It's not easy, and that's what I wanted to say. As hard as it is, ask. Just ask, because I look back now and wish I'd done it sooner. But I would not be here. I wouldn't be alive if I hadn't asked for help.
Yeah.
And it, you know, that's where I was at in the end, you know.
That's the reality of it.
He's left you with all of that mental damage, but at the same time also he's left the family destitute because he spent all the money. You had no clue. You don't even have a house.
No, I mean, you know, I lived, you know, the Instagram life. I had a beautiful home. Also, I thought, you know, a beautiful car, beautiful children. The home I thought we owned, we didn't, was rented. And so the mortgage I thought was actually, and he hadn't paid that for years. There are debts in my name, hundreds of thousands of pounds, things that were taken out that I know nothing about. I've worked for 25 years, every single day for ITV, and I have, apart from a very small pension, I have nothing to show for it. I won't be able to get a mortgage. I won't be able to take out a credit card. I have a very basic bank account, and that's my reality now. But as hard as that is, that's nothing, because I've got my children. I'm sitting here talking to you now. I've got family and people around me who love me, and my case is just one of so many, and I'm so lucky, and actually to be given this platform and you know, to use this public arena now to say to anybody, as hard as it seems, and there are dark days, and you know, I was at my lowest ebb, and paramedics saved me, the police saved me, the Crown Prosecution Service have saved me, and if they can do that for me, they can do that for anybody out there, absolutely.
And also, one important point was that you were believed, you were listened.
Yes.
I didn't think I would, and again, because I was married to him, it's effectively my word against his, but there was evidence there ultimately, and not being believed was something that I really was frightened of.
Yeah, that must be a fear.
But I was believed, and I would say to anybody, you will be believed too.
Well, you're very brave, and we really appreciate it.
Done.
And you will certainly have helped a lot of people watching today.
Thank you.
So thank you, Ruth, very much indeed.
Absolutely, thank you.
What's the weather going to be like?
Sunshine all the way.
Oh, please.
Thank you.